Hi, welcome to our second Q&A video where we answer the questions that you've sent in. And I hope you've enjoyed watching the pictures straight from our garden today. Spring has finally come to Grimsby. Kathy's got the first answer.
Our question is, Lorraine asked, what authority do we have in terms of casting out demons from friends who are struggling with issues? Well, we think that the best authority that you have is over your own personal demons, and we don't have as much authority over other people's demons. If the demon is there, it has a right to be there, and so it's up to the person involved to remove that right and then expel the demon. We can pray for the person to help them use the authority that they have in Christ Jesus. Now, another important tool to remember is to help your friend through steps of forgiveness, because very often forgiveness is a major block to expelling demons.
Now here's a question from me. Can psychedelic drugs open the door both physically and spiritually for schizophrenic symptoms? This is a very common question that I've been asked when I was in practice, and there's no doubt that psychedelic street drugs can cause psychotic symptoms which would be indistinguishable from a schizophrenic psychotic episode. However, in my experience, I never found that using street drugs caused a schizophrenic illness. It could bring it on earlier. So in other words, someone who's prone to schizophrenia using street drugs could cause the symptoms to occur earlier, but that's just early triggering. I never actually found that psychedelic street drugs actually caused the illness.
Krista wrote, I've been through a few wildernesses. It is like God is playing hide and seek, so it's harder to hear him, though I know he is always there. So how do I hear him during a wilderness time? That's a very good question, and a lot of us struggle with that issue. The first thing is you need to make time to hear him. If you don't make the time to listen, then it's going to be much, much harder to actually hear him. So actually make time to hear him during your devotions. And then give him a chance to talk. Don't do all the talking. Sometimes we have to shut up and just sit and listen and wait for him to talk to us. We can ask him questions and journal the answers. And then we can also watch for him to talk to us in different kinds of ways, whether it's through other people, whether it's through nature, circumstances, friends. God can use all kinds of things when we are in a wilderness time. But you know, sometimes those wilderness points or those wilderness times are just for us to learn how to walk by faith. And even though it is really difficult to not necessarily be able to hear from him, that's what he's asking us to do at that point. So Grant did a blog a few weeks ago about this, so you should go back and have a look at it.
What is a generational curse? Well, the Bible makes it clear in Deuteronomy that certain sins carry curses that cross generational lines. And so the most common one that most people would recall is in Deuteronomy, where God says, for the penalty of idolatry, which would also include occult involvement, God says, I am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. So clearly, the sin of one generation, the consequences can be passed on to subsequent generations, which means that things may be affecting us that were triggered by the sins of our ancestors that we're not guilty of, but we're still suffering some of the consequences. Derek Prince says, a generational curse is like a long arm reaching out and grabbing you from your ancestors. Now that's pretty creepy if you ask me. But think of it this way, a generational curse is a pressure to sin on each generation. But it only takes hold when we give in to that sin, and then that gives Satan the right to pressure the next generation. But the good news is, of course, we can break generational curses off of ourselves and off of our families. And in my DVD, The Power of Words, you can actually pray those prayers with me, because I've recorded the prayers to break generational curses. So when you're watching that DVD, just pray along with me and you can rid yourself and your family of the generational curse. So I really encourage you to do that. It's a good housekeeping exercise because you have no idea what your ancestors were involved in.
The next one is, what are hindrances that keep Christians from sitting in God's presence? The primary one is apathy. We just think we're fine. We don't need it. This is good enough. I'm too busy. Those are all reasons that stop us from experiencing his presence. But another thing is that if we are actually practicing sin or walking in rebellion, that is a major block to being around God. And if you really, really want his presence, God is always willing to come when he's invited. Remember, Revelation 3:20 was written to Christians, and it says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me." So you see, he's just waiting to be asked, and we need to be ready to invite him.
And the final question is, what is DID, or dissociative identity disorder? Now, this is a complex condition that's not very well understood and certainly not talked about very much, but it's used to be called split personality. Well, DID is when someone has suffered from a severe emotional trauma, particularly in childhood, and the pain of that trauma causes a part of their personality to split off from the main personality in an attempt to contain the pain of the trauma in a limited personality, so it doesn't affect the whole personality. So in a sense, it allows the main personality to get on with their lives, and it walls off the pain of the trauma in one personality, and that personality maintains the age of the person when the trauma happened. And so if you've been traumatized many times, you can have many parts and many dissociations. And so every time you're traumatized, it is possible that a little part of your personality gets locked off and walled off to contain that pain so the rest of you can function. Otherwise, the pain would be just too overwhelming. So in fact, it's a mechanism that was built into our personality to protect us from overwhelming pain. However, if you have many parts, it can be very dysfunctional and make your life very difficult. Now, some people say or ask me, is this demonization? Well, it really isn't. This is a split of your personality. Now, demons love it because they love trauma, and they love to aggravate it, magnify it. They love to inhabit these little parts and continually harass and magnify the pain. But it actually is not a form of demonization, but they can occur at the same time. And the healing for DID is a very specialized inner healing ministry, but it is available, and we've seen some very spectacular results from inner healing ministry to DID. So if you're wondering about that, I encourage you to talk to an inner healing minister, because it's definitely worth treating. So those are all the questions and answers we have for today. If you want to send us your questions, be sure to send them by just clicking on the Contact Us button, which is right up there. And if this is your first visit here, then we want to encourage you to get our 4-week free self-assessment guide. And you can get that by becoming a subscriber to our weekly email newsletter. And to do that, just fill out the subscription form right there. So send us your questions, and we'll talk to you again next week.